relationships are often portrayed as being universally bad in the popular imagination, Aspro is actually a very rewarding place to work for the reason that I was talking to Malcolm about. It's the broadest of broad disciplines. It's multidisciplinary. We get involved in loads of stuff. You'll see some examples as we go through a huge range of types of work that bring benefits to local communities. So back in the midst of time, the Aspro team might have been called the outside party engineer team. I don't know a huge amount about the history from that time, but they seem to focus mainly on supporting people building bridges over the railway. Not this one. The only picture I could find was of the high level bridge. We're not claiming that Aspro built the high level bridge. It's a bit beyond this perhaps, but there we go. I certainly didn't appreciate before I joined Aspro that actually not all railway bridges are owned by Network Rail. Lots of them are owned by outside parties, by councils, by Highways England, and they build and maintain those bridges. I thought I'd better bring a bit of living history with me too. So when Ben was Programme Director for Aspro, he found this book, which appropriately has BR embossed on the front of it. And this kind of had all the records, a little bit like this, you probably can't see online, unless I hold it up like that, of how we managed Aspro back in the 1960s. So we do it a little bit like that now. We use a few more computers nowadays, but that's what they did back then. So I imagine then that much of the smaller scale work was probably handled locally. I imagine that's how the railway worked back in those days. But nowadays our scope is somewhat broader, as we'll explain. So we come through from there to the rail track era. So rail track outsourced everything. That's pretty much their mantra. So they outsourced Aspro to lots of contractors, just like maintenance. They quickly considered that didn't work, and they brought it all back in-house again. Soon after Network Rail was founded, they brought stuff back in-house in 2006. But I think in those years, and certainly leading up to 2020, when I joined the Aspro team, Aspro appeared to be undervalued, I think, by the business. By its nature, it's not really a function that takes the limelight. It's concerned with delivering work delivered by others, rather than the big, exciting, high-profile work that Network Rail delivers with its supply chain. And organisationally, it seemed to be neglected. There were only a few leadership roles at a fairly junior level, and I think it's fair to say that the workload overwhelmed the size of the team. Both customers and staff were not really happy with that situation. So here in the Eastern region, we had to be selective about the work we took on, and that meant some of the aspirations of those who wanted to do work on or near the railway were delayed, or perhaps they were cancelled altogether. So we'll move forward from there. Here's a glamorous looking chap. When Mark Kahn was the chief executive of Network Rail, he commissioned Professor Peter Hansford here to chair an independent review of contestability in the UK rail market. And that had the aim of encouraging third-party investment and infrastructure delivery on the railway. And Hansford published his report in 2017, and it was key, really, to transforming Aspro and our general approach to third-party investment. Obviously, the scope of his report was broader than just Aspro, but he covered these barriers to contestability. So the lack of a specific party responsible for ensuring the creation of a more contestable market, a lack of a visibility of a pipeline of third-party projects, Network Rail roles and behaviours, inappropriate risk transfer, standards and scope control, asset protection agreements, the things we use to get into a commercial agreement with our customers, and complex business cases and funding agreements. So focusing in on a couple of those, on Network Rail roles and behaviours, Network Rail was characterised as being fragmented and lacking a common authoritative voice, which was able to commit the whole organisation across its many departments and many different roles. It's characterised as being unresponsive and lacking interest in third parties' objectives. It was unable or unwilling to provide certainty of project costs and lacking interest in helping third parties achieve a cost-effective result. And on inappropriate risk transfer in particular, Handford said that third parties were taking on too much risk, given that Netrail gets a benefit from their investment. So Netrail did something about that, which was called the Open for Business programme. So that was Netrail's response to the Handford review, and it made several changes to the organisation to address the problems that Handford identified. So business development teams, new business development teams were introduced into the business to focus on attracting third-party investment and delivering it. The sponsor role was more clearly defined. I don't know how many of you have dealt with sponsorship and project management, but that kind of blurry line was better defined, and there was a national head of sponsorship function created to try and make that role clearer and more accessible to third parties. The whole ASPRO organisation was changed both nationally and locally here in Easton. So the head of asset protection role was introduced, the one I'm in, and the size of the regional ASPRO teams was increased. As I said, we couldn't cope with the workload before, so the size was increased to do a better job of that. And then a couple of national roles were created within the technical authority, which really helps because we're devolved, so we need to be nationally coordinated in the way we manage ASPRO. So that really helps with that and with continuous improvement. And lots of the things I'm going to talk about in the coming slides are a result of national coordination beyond us just working in our region. And then the whole suite of asset protection agreements were revised, and that was done in conjunction with the ORR. So we've now got a kind of regulated set of template agreements. We've revised them several times in response to what we've learned from projects, what third parties have learned from projects too. And then risk funds were introduced. So that was the basic idea of that, although customers always think of it, we charge them a risk fee, which is like an insurance premium, and they always say, why do we have to pay this fee on top? And the answer is so that you can claim against us later, a little bit like insurance. So that thing about inappropriate risk transfer, that the third parties were taking on too much, well, now you can pay an insurance premium and we'll pay out. And my experience of claims is that they normally get their money's worth for that. So yeah, but it helps to encourage investment if they can get past the idea that they've got to pay this premium into the pot by basically saying risks like possession cancellation due to strike action. We've got quite a bit of that recently. Won't be your fault in a way, and we'll pay out from that risk fund on that. So that helped in terms of supporting third-party investments. I've got a whole section on new standards because I thought, as well as history, standards is probably what PWI people like. So we'll go on to that. So they've been developed, improved to help improve how we do ASPRO work. And then cost effectiveness, scope control, and third-party pipeline. Really, I've rammed too much into one point at the bottom of the slide. But those three issues really are the things that are a perpetual challenge for us. So one of the key words in my management in the ASPRO team at the moment is competence. So we need to improve the competence of our teams, because effectively, if we know what we're doing, if we're working professionally and efficiently, then we will affect those three things positively. So one thing we'd like to do is benchmark our estimates. I call that the Holy Grail. We've not got there yet. I've been here 5 years, and we still need to do that. It's difficult to achieve because the scope and the site constraints of each of our jobs is so variable, but we're still looking to do that to make sure that we're cost effective, and we can say to a customer, you've got this kind of job, it will probably be 40 grand or 100 grand or whatever it's going to cost, rather than estimating it just variably each time. Without insulting them, most of our customers are uninformed. They don't understand the railway. They don't understand the scope of their own work generally, and that increases the likelihood that scope and risks will emerge as a project progresses. So it's better if we are more competent to understand all those railway interfaces, and then we can help to control the scope and the risk at the early stages of the project. But obviously we've got to train our team to know a whole lot of stuff. I always call it jack of all trades, master of none kind of team, which is a very happy position for me to be in. But yeah, we need to train our team to be the jack of a little bit of trap and a little bit of GSMR and a little bit of geotech and everything else that we need to do. So yeah, we've made many attempts to anticipate the third-party pipeline as well. It'd be really good if we knew exactly what was happening. We're 20 years ahead, and then we knew exactly what resources we need and how we needed to train them, and all of that. But that is never going to happen, and that's because of the political context. So we'll talk for a little while about the broader political context. So I'm going to go out there and claim that government devolution to regional combined authorities in terms of investment money has had an even bigger impact on Aspro than devolution within Network Rail. It's had a huge impact. So explaining this kind of chart we've got here, much of Aspro's funding has always come from councils. Councils get funded to do quite a lot of the projects that we get involved in. But devolution to regional combined authorities, we're in Yorkshire, so I've put a West Yorkshire Combined Authority, maybe put a Bradford guys rather than our combined authority. But anyway, devolution to them, along with the contestability agenda that prompted the Hansford Review and Open for Business, has moved the funding route for a substantial number of our projects. So traditionally, the funding came in a pretty straightforward way from the Treasury, the DFT, to Network Rail, who delivered it. That's the monopoly that Hansford said is not contestable, that needs to be broken up. So now it goes from the Treasury, not really to the DFT, to the combined authority for that area. And then those combined authorities have a genuine contestable choice, I think more so than they did before the Hansford Review and a response to it. So they can either choose to deliver it themselves and get Aspro to assure it, or they can choose to instruct Network Rail to deliver it using their supply chain. That's had an effect. It's had many effects. It means we've got to compete for our bread and butter, but it also has increased our workload quite a lot, because that's quite an appealing thing, is to say you can choose your own contractor, you can choose your own designer, and you can design this work, and then you'll need to pay a little bit of fee to Aspro as well to just make sure that's in compliance with Network Rail standards. So we need to rise to the challenge of providing a proportionate and well-informed assurance service for the combined authorities alongside the huge variety of other customers. I'll talk to you a little bit about all the different customers we have. And that's how we need to do, as the title of the presentation says. So we need to encourage investment, encourage them to take this route, not to the expense of our capital programs colleagues, of course, and also assure safety. But central government still holds the purse strings. So whilst the combined authorities still have a fair amount of control over their spending, many of the biggest decisions are still dependent on the outcomes of major central government spending reviews. So just last week, we had what in Aspro we've been waiting for months, the comprehensive spending review. We often have the outcome of levelling up fund bids, adjustments to the RNEP enhancements funding pipeline. Decisions like that are made all the time and have a very substantial effect on us. And that is the major source of uncertainty that prevents clear visibility of a long-term third-party project pipeline. But really, if you think about it, you can see that that's justifiable, because political priorities are going to change. That's because the priorities of voters are going to change. And if that means we've got to invest in the NHS, then we're not going to invest in this new station over here. So I guess in Aspro we do get affected by the kind of national narrative and national political decisions quite a bit. So we'll move on next to talk about standards and processes. So we've done some work on our key standards and processes to tighten up the organisation and improve our performance. So firstly, we'll talk about a new suite of standards. So I haven't mentioned it on the slide, but CIV 094, which is the framework for asset protection, and then CIV 095 for third-party jobs. That's where people are investing in the railway, and 096 for outside-party jobs where they're not investing in it, but they're just working alongside it. So we've written standards, new standards for those. So they guide our teams, they promote consistency in Aspro work, they set out the end-to-end process required to manage an Aspro project, and they detail the responsibilities of each of the roles involved. So they provide a good basis for training our staff. This is what you need to do to meet the requirements of the standards, and also for audits as well. So we're now auditing our teams. We've been going around the routes and regions. I've had the lucky opportunity to go to Western Wales and Scotland and Central Route and feed in our experience of trying to comply with the standard and help them to try and do that as well. Competence is the other thing. So we need to define what we do. Then we need to define how we do it. So competence is key. So we've added Module 8 to CIV 1000. CIV 1000 is the Civil's competence standard. So here is a not very exciting role profile table that tells you that basically the head of ASPRO is meant to know everything and other people know a little bit less. That's a really good thing, having a competence framework that we can implement so that we know kind of concretely where our people are at and where they need to develop. We've also reinforced our compliance with Module 6 of CIV 1000, which is about Civil's engineering competence, because that's our lead discipline and the thing that our engineers need to be most competent in. We've also engaged with the National Construction Management Team because the way we do construction management is a little bit different to how capital programs would do it. So capital programs are assuring that the contractor is delivering it safely. We're kind of assuring that someone else's contractor is doing that. So we're kind of another step removed, but we still need to do the right job by the standards. So we've got a construction assurance competence framework for our needs. So we've got a high priority to make sure we implement that, make sure we know where everybody is against those competence frameworks, assess them against it and train them. And currently we're working on developing a training course in particular for this one. You can't see it on the screen, but ASPRO 7 railway interfaces. That's basically the jack of all trades competence, which says know everything about everything on the railway, technically and in an engineering sense, which is difficult for people to achieve. So we're developing a kind of, I think it'll end up as a 3-day training course, which is not enough to know everything, but to kind of dip your toe in. We do, just in case you're worried about our slapdash approach to assurance, we do actually consult competent project engineers in geotech or telecoms or whatever it is, but we need to know to go to them, so we need to know the basics. So we're developing a training course for that. And then a few other things. So the business development teams were introduced, so there's some processes about that. They build relationships with their customers. They need to engage with them in a regular and structured way to make the case for third-party investment. And there's been quite a lot of work done, I think, on formally evaluating business cases, making sure that our agreements are watertight so that we're minimising the risk to Network Rail and to the third party when we're embarking on projects. We've also influenced the latest revision of CIV 003. So that's the Civil's Engineering Assurance Standard. So we fed into that quite a bit to make sure it accounts for ASPRO work. So because most standards, if you were to look at the bottom list of people it could be cascaded to, it doesn't really count ASPRO normally. We've tried to make sure it does, and we're consulted in that. So for example, CIV 003 has Form G and Form H newly introduced. That's for fairly simple design assurance. We do a lot of that. So it's great to have those for ASPRO work. And I couldn't really talk about safety or standards without saying 019 is key. So I told you we've got uninformed customers. They don't know what a PTS is. We normally give them TVPs. So our job is about supervising blue hats on site and making sure they don't come to any harm. We try to comply with that. So we'll move on next to look at what I think is one of the most exciting things about ASPRO. Opinions are divided. It's called ACE because it's ACE. It stands for ASPRO Customer Experience. It's our computer system we use to manage our work bank and to improve our customer interface. So previously, we had this book which told you a little bit about each scheme, but if it wasn't on your desk, that's not much use. Then we had some spreadsheets and emails, and if it wasn't on your computer, that's not much use. But ACE is brilliant because it's a system that's available to all of our team and to the customer to see where these projects are. So we're talking a bit about the scale of the number of projects we've got. There are loads. So it's very easy to lose track of what's going on a particular job. So ACE helps us with that. We've redesigned this customer portal recently, put a nice picture of a cutting on it to make it look more attractive. And when you sign up to get in touch with us, we've done a lot of, I'm not claiming credit for any of this, but done a lot to make sure that ASPO is very obvious to someone that doesn't know what they're looking for on a NetRail website, and also search engine optimization. So hopefully, if you put something like "I want to work near a railway" into Google, you'll end up on this page. And then we've made this form that sits behind this kind of expand to say the right question. So if you say, "I want to cut a tree in my garden," you won't get a question about how to build a new station. So the form is intelligent in that way. And we've had great feedback, from customers on the improvement that we've had since we've been using ACE. So we do regular customer surveys out of this system. We get quite good feedback mostly for what we've done, but we have a question specifically about what do you think of our new computer system? And almost all the time, last week we had a bad example, but almost all the time they say this is great. This has really brought us forward. So it allows us to do lots of things. So you've got all sorts of tabs down the side. I'm not meant to make this a presentation just about ACE, but we've got lots of fields that we record for each job, and you can pull those all out in reporting. So we can manage our work bank in real time. We can see things like how many jobs are assigned to each person, whether a job's dormant or not. I talk quite a lot about a drop ball job. So I've got over 1,000 jobs live at any time in my portfolio, and it's easy to forget about one. So what ACE allows us to do that we never could do before was go, "Hey, Louise, I can see that you haven't done anything on this job for the last 3 months. Go do something about it, please," before the customer rings me up and says, "What are you doing about my job?" And the answer is nothing. So that's just one example. We can see how many of different types of schemes we've got. So I've utilised that to show you a graph in a bit. We pull that out into Power BI. And commercial agreements is a massive part of the churn of our team. So we can see the status of those. Have we sent them out to the customer? Have we got them signed? What's the value? That kind of stuff, which helps us with commercial management of our portfolio. And then I probably picked this up already, but communication within the team and with the customer is much improved. So you can see here in the blue, there's the customer coming back to us saying, "Thanks for getting in touch with us. This is a very common thing. We're currently preparing for a planning appeal, which will take a few months." So we go, "Thanks very much. See you in a few months." It's a way we can directly talk to the customer. And when we hand over between different colleagues managing schemes, they can see all that history. It's right there. They don't need to go in someone's emails who's left, or if someone's on holiday. It just basically allows much better coordination of what we're doing. There's documents in there too. So you can share all the engineering documents, all the project management documents are all in there, and you can make it accessible to the team, accessible to the customer as you choose. So we're always looking to improve it. This is a system that started as a sales system. We're not really a sales team. So we've had to do a lot of development with a developer to do that. We're looking at engineering deliverables at the moment. So there is kind of a system in there, but it doesn't really work. So just making sure that it can go to all the different reviewers, because engineering is quite complex. It comes in from the customer, goes to our multidisciplinary engineer. He needs to assign it to various stakeholders to look at. So we need quite a complex kind of engineering review functionality within there. So that's one of our big things, having done that improvement to the kind of front end of the customer most recently. And we're doing smaller improvements all the time to try and make the system better. Adoption is a key thing. So if you don't use this system, if there's nothing in the system, it's not very useful. So we're looking at doing that more, and we're now reaping more and more of the benefits of using it. We're also, in terms of improvements, looking to use Primavera P6. If I said that benchmarking our cost estimates was one of the holy grails, the other holy grail is having a program where we know what's going on. So we've had a few fits and starts about this, but we are looking now to produce a program. So a few years ago, we said to people, can you give us a program? Either the customer, can you give us a program, starting with a blank sheet of paper, or a member of my team, can you come up with a program? And the answer generally is not really. It's a bit difficult. So the approach we're taking now is we're going to provide a template for each of our scheme types. And we're going to say, we think that if you start the job on this date, you're going to need to do this, 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 and this, and you'll get to the end on this date. And then the philosophy of the straw man applies then. So you can then say, well, actually, we don't need that deliverable, or that deliverable is already done, or that deliverable is going to be 4 weeks later than that. But anyway, the idea is that we'll get that program, we'll apply it across our thousands of schemes, and then at the end, we should spit out resource loading, cost loading, better forecasting. And so we're putting quite a bit of effort into that. I haven't dwelt on the slides there, but that is what we're aiming to do. So looking to get a decent program that enables us to get all those benefits. So we've talked quite a lot about our work bank. So I thought I'd give you a bit of an idea of it. Again, the screen's a long way away, so I'll have to point some things out. So we've just taken Anglia under our wing. So we previously only had the North and East route, East Midlands and East Coast. Anglia used to report by a different way. There was an ASPO team reporting through the infrastructure director instead of into the DEAM team like we do. So we've just merged. But anyway, this says 1,700 live jobs at the moment within those three routes, North and East, East Midlands and East Coast. And we're turning those over all the time. So in my team, which is kind of the northern half of those three routes, we get about between 20 and 30 new jobs in a week and close out 20 or 30. So it's always turning over constantly. But for some reason, it seems to stay reasonably constant. I never have less than 1,000 jobs. I never have more than 1,100, despite all the churn that happens. So you can see here, utilities. So we do a huge amount of stuff with utilities. So cables going over the railway to carry power, or open reach, phone cables, things going underneath the railway, level crossings. So a huge amount of that. Property is the next one. So buildings next to the railway, basically, either new ones being built or existing ones being repaired. Telecoms comes here again, and highways, so digging up the road, as Mr. Bull in Peppa Pig does. We do quite a lot of that. And then smaller numbers, but more complex. We do quite a lot of inspecting bridges, building new ones, third-party jobs. So that's stuff actually on the railway, building new stations, changing station car parks, stuff like that. And then a long tail of smaller job types. That's a general idea of our work bank. And here's some pictures of what that looks like in real life. So here's a bed warehouse in Bridlington, one example. So pretty difficult to do anything to that building in terms of repairing it without taking a possession. So we'll be there to facilitate that. And then here's a pretty complex type. So if you look around Leeds, there are loads of cranes around the railway, and we're responsible for making sure those cranes don't fall on the railway. How do I know? Because Paul Rutter told me so. Not Paul Rutter, Richard Owens, I think it's here. But anyway, yeah. So we need to make sure those cranes don't fall over. That's a major part of our engineering, and make sure the buildings that they're building don't fall over either. It's a bit more complicated than that, but broadly that's one thing. Here's an example of digging up the road near a level crossing, which is our job, felling a tree or repairing cables in an embankment. So we get quite a lot of business through route control, actually, where a mom has gone out or someone else had said, someone's digging a hole here, should they be doing that? And can I hand it off to you? Because I'm the mom and I'm interested in other things. So you go talk to this utility supplier, which is almost always what it is. So that's outside party work. We'll spend a little while talking about some of our big work now. This is actually mostly outside party, but yeah. So York Central, right over there, together with York Station Frontage, which are two different schemes of both in our remit. So 2,500 new homes in York Central. It's a teardrop that's been rail locked by these two lines. So here's a teardrop kind of diverging around there. Sorry, people online, you can't see what I was drawing there. Yeah, a big bit of sidings for years and years and years, now going to be transformed to have lots of new houses lots of new commercial and retail space. And obviously, because it's rail, obviously you need new bridges to get in there. So this is the one that Rachel Maskell went to Parliament to say it must have glass parapets on it, because otherwise you can't see the Minster. So that's the kind of thing that ASPO get involved in, because you must be able to see the Minster from there. So that's a bridge that we're currently building, and you may see the piling if you go up just north of York, just turning off Water End if you know that road. So there'll be a new bridge coming up Water End into the teardrop around here at the north end. There's a new spur connection to the National Railway Museum, and Lehman Road will be diverted, so you won't be able to get down the existing Lehman Road. Sorry, those of you not local to York, but yeah, because that will then be diverted to run through the middle of the development. And in a few years' time, we'll have a new Western Station entrance as part of that. So the back of the station, as you might see it now, is not a very attractive way to come in. So there'll be a whole kind of portico there. So lots of work for ASPRO, loads of construction, loads of engineering. For those interested in track, we're currently managing the CRT to do with that, because the piling has caused the track to move. Yeah, there's some tamping to be done, and make sure we're managing the CRT there. So it genuinely is multidisciplinary. White Rose new station, so somewhere I spent a lot of my time on. So this is what is currently built. So just outside Leeds, near the White Rose shopping centre, and also an office park there, a new station. It's mostly built, but then we ran out of money. So since March 2024, it's been stopped. We're hoping that it's going to carry on again soon and get opened. But a pretty exciting engineering challenge, really, because it's up on a 12-metre embankment, which is a pretty unusual place to put a station. So you can see there in the picture the stair cores that are used to get up to that height and then cross across on a link bridge. That's my favourite thing about going to hospital when I was a kid, was link bridges in the middle of the sky. So we've got some of those at White Rose Station when it finally opens. So that's good. Our biggest project has been the reopening of the Northumberland line. So that was reopened to passenger traffic for the first time since 1963, back in December. I got to see Heidi Alexander on her 8th day as Transport Secretary opening that. So that's been good. So between Newcastle and Ashington in Northumberland, there's 3 stations out of 6 already open: Ashington, Seaton Delaval and Newsham, and the passenger numbers have exceeded expectations, mostly with people going to St James's Park, as far as I can hear, from Ashington. So very happy about that. But as you can see here, just one example at Newsham Station, new bridge, new platforms, loads and loads of engineering going on there.
And a hybrid scheme as well, with the council delivering the stations, with Network Rail doing the railway systems work on the line itself.
Absolutely. It's not always ASPRO or capital programmes, it can be both, as in this case. Allen Bridge, one of the ones we've been working on for a few years. So at the Angel of the North, if you've ever been up there, the old 2-lane bridge has been replaced with a 3-lane bridge. So lots of beam lifts in rules of the route possessions to put a new bridge in over quite a long period. And then in February and March this year, we demolished the old bridge. So that was quite exciting due to limited OLE clearances. There's bigger OLE clearances on the new bridge, but on the old bridge, the methodology that was used was to take the OLE down, put it under some block mats, effectively a track protection system, and put it back up again at the end of every possession. I confess to being pretty nervous about that the OLE wouldn't go back again. But it did 6 times. And we put the track protection and bog mats down, and we did open to traffic after every weekend, and it was all okay. So that bridge is now totally gone, and looks a little bit more like this, with the piers also demolished. So yeah, definitely a case where we don't know how to do everything we're asked to do. We have to think quite a bit in engineering terms. Leeds Station Gateway. So if you know the northeast side of Leeds Station Gateway, or of Leeds Station where you get in, there's quite a level difference between Bishopgate and New Station Street, and then the station. So it's been an aspiration for a long time to kind of tidy that all up make a newer public realm area with some staircases and some lifts. The kind of big problem with that was that the Victorians, or whoever it was, built the station on top of the River Aire, and they also built it on top of what we call the Mill Goit. It's called the Mill Goit because the Goit is an old name for a culvert. So basically, there used to be a water mill fed from a channel that ran underneath the front of the station. And that's big open space underneath the station. The beams holding it up had basically become life expired, so they couldn't really hold the load anymore. So there's been a whole load of work to ship all that out. So if you've been to Leeds Station, you'll see a great big hole in the ground. I think it's now actually been covered up again. So we've put new beams in, new concrete and waterproofing on top, and fairly soon we'll be working on the public realm there. And then finally, out of my patch, but down south, there's a new station at Brent Cross West, which has transformed that area really in North London. A new stop on the Midland Main Line with 4 platforms. Again, capital programmes doing lots of the rail corridor work, the track signalling, and ASPRO heavily involved in kind of the station and the structure around that. And I haven't mentioned on here Radlett, so again, out of my patch down south, but lots of work done there to basically cut a great big hole in the middle of Midland Main Line, push a bridge through it, put the track back on top, which was a big achievement this last Christmas. And I could talk for a long time about many of our other projects, but I won't. I'll instead move on to questions. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Shall I start? What do you see as the biggest risk to railway safety from outside party activities? What's the thing that you fear most in terms of things that people do that could end up with a challenging railway outcome?
I guess I'd group it into 2 things. So I'd say on one hand, non-engagement. So one thing we realised a long time ago is that there's, I don't know how many thousand miles of railway boundary, and we can't police it all. And so, and also we're in a way not very attractive because you have to pay us money for us to check your homework. That's how ASPRO works. So we get a lot of people who don't come to us in the first place because they don't know we exist, or they want to know we exist. And then a lot of people who talk to us, and then we say, £20,000 please, and they say no, and then they build it anyway. And then a more specific answer to your question, Ben, is I think building or crane collapse or piling rig collapse. I would say there's lots of risks, but those are the things that people sometimes get on with without us necessarily being involved or without following our requirements. Mining's been a big thing. Thinking of all the other things I could have put in. But yeah, hopefully mining is relatively stable, whereas cranes, piling rigs and buildings are not always.
And are there some things that, when it comes to third party building it on the railway, like White Rose Station there, are there some things that you would discourage third parties from doing themselves? If a local authority came along and said, we want to do this, would you say,
yeah, so
really?
I think I've matured in that. One thing that I insist on saying is you've got to get a competent railway contractor, because one of the lessons we've learned lots of times is that if people bring along a building contractor that doesn't understand the railway, then it's going to cost them a lot of money and take them a lot of time, because we're going to say, no, try again with your design, try again, try again, try again. So I'm not sure that I would actually discourage them doing anything in particular, but I'd encourage them to employ a competent designer to do it. It's interesting, isn't it? Ben will know, others won't. We're not meant to be a designer, so our role under CDM is nothing, effectively. It's kind of stakeholder. We're not the principal designer, we're not the principal contractor, we're not the client. So we're there to assure, but not to design. But that's very tempting sometimes for me to say, I don't think you should do that. And yeah, so sometimes I try and say that whilst not quite saying it. Yes.
Who makes sure that any new outside party scheme is developed and constructed to cause minimum destruction to the railway? Who actually oversees that?
Well, we should.
Because
We should. Our team in asset protection are remitted to do that. Yeah, but carry on. You were going to say. So yeah,
well,
That's an example coming there.
I better not.
no, you can. It's fine.
Yeah, because you seem to have set up a little empire really for outside parties. And sort of its communication and integration with the real railway.
Yeah, and I suppose that's why we're there. So that's why we do the engineering interface. I've majored on that, but we also do the kind of access planning interface. So whilst I say we had disruptive possessions, for example, for Allenham Bridge, we only ever get those when we piggyback on someone else. So Darlington Station was being redone, and we saved them money by, this is probably a bit of a knavish way to describe it, by basically shoving half of the scheduled four costs to an outside party. So we, we do kind of integrate the access properly and kind of use other access opportunities where we can. So to minimally disrupt the railway in access terms, and then by making sure that their designs are compliant so that safety and engineering assurance requirements are met. There's an optimization. I will read that in a minute. There's an optimization bit at the end of my job title that I always leave off. People like to remind me of. So it's head of asset. The team is called asset protection and optimization. And the reason for that optimization there is to do exactly what you're saying.
It's you who would say, think again, you're not having a 40-hour total possession. Go away and rethink it.
Yes.
That would be you.
Yes. Ordinarily, most of our, I've talked about a couple of disruptive possessions. We hardly have any. Most of it is in non-disruptive rules of route.
Encouraging outside parties and third parties to come up with methodologies that minimise railway disruption.
And they don't want that either. So in the example of cranes and piling rigs, there's a standard called CIB 0063, where we say it's got to be done in possession unless you can risk assess it. And so we do risk assess it and make sure that the crane mat is really well maintained and the tilt sensors and everything else about the crane or the piling rig are set up correctly. And then we might say, very cautiously, you can do this outside possession. And that benefits them as well, because they don't want to wait for possessions. That messes up their program. So, yeah, it is us that will say, no, we don't want you to disrupt the railway. Alaric says, typically at what stage of a third-party project would ASPRO get involved? Feasibility, AIP, detailed design. I could be negative, Alaric, and say past detailed design and into construction, but that's not really true. We do get quite a lot out of feasibility, and I think it's getting better as we develop relationships with more customers. Certainly the combined authorities, I think we've got a fairly mature relationship with them where they do know that they need to come to us. So yeah, we've certainly got quite a lot of schemes at the moment in feasibility. It varies by customer. I don't really want to probably name the ones that have instructed their contract, have done everything and then said, have an ASPRO then. There are still a few of those, but I see it as my job to basically influence it, I'm talking earlier.
So you said you had sort of 1,000+ projects to look after. How can you look after 1,000 schemes?
Yeah, good question. By having quite a big team, I think, is one thing to say. By managing that geographically, so dividing up the pie and trying to make sure that people don't have more schemes than they can cope with, by quite a lot of those schemes being quite small. So I've got about, I think, 70 of the third-party schemes at the moment, and that's quite hard to deal with. But 1,000 outside party schemes is probably equally hard to deal with, if that makes sense. And then also by saying they've got a long life cycle. So third party schemes have got kind of, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years to run. Allen Bridge, I think, starts in 2010 and we demolished it this February. So a 15-year lifespan. So if you think of 1,000 projects, there's some of them that are digging up high level crossing. They're gone in 2 weeks. There are some that are going for 15 years. It's rarely the case that we're demolishing Allen Bridge and lifting the link bridge into White Road Station and putting the bridge in at York Central all at once. So basically, we kind of rely on the fact that the major construction and design work happens sort of in an uncoordinated way. So we've got a big workload that we're monitoring, but we're not intensely working on all the schemes in that sense. And that's why P6 will help us, because we would like to smooth our resource profile. And so, yeah, we currently rely on a lot of contractors, and you could argue we could have some underutilization there and some periods where we're tight. So if we know what's coming, then we can.
With the challenge that you're not actually managing your projects, you're managing other people's projects, and they all have their own timescales and their own timeline to work to. And actually, resource
Cost.
yes,
And minimum cost,
Yeah.
absolutely.
so resource smoothing for you isn't necessarily their main consideration.
Absolutely not. No. And the life of a head of Aspro is to get a complaint every day that you're not fast enough for me. But chin up, we do lots of stuff and we're reasonably well. Yes.
Ask on that. So the sponsor's got timescales, got a budget. What's your biggest challenges in trying to satisfy that?
To be honest, it probably is what Louise says. So it probably is getting through all the stuff. So yeah, I've given her an answer that says we manage these 1,000 projects, but really it's demand here, it's demand here, it's demand here, and it's a case of yeah, our biggest challenge is getting to all the customers quickly enough. Really, although we obviously try and employ a big enough team and all that kind of stuff, that's probably the biggest organisational challenge, and just the relentless nature of here's another 30, another 30, another 30.
Given a particular individual scheme, they want to get it done by this date at that cost. You've got third parties you're trying to earn, you know, stuff all running in different directions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. One, I'll say our other biggest challenge, pulling again from the presentation, is competence. So if I lose staff because I've just had a contract transition, then I need to train the new ones up and the existing ones. So do they understand the depths of interoperability and CSORA? Not really. So I need to train them up. So yeah, it's the complexity and the scale. Yeah, I'd say.
How does asset protection change under GBR? Surely in a more integrated railway, this becomes easier.
I hope so. Yes, very much so.
What do you expect to change? Where do you see the impacts?
So I work with TOCs, I guess. I haven't mentioned that in the presentation, but we work a lot with TOCs, assuring their estates work effectively. And so I do see a change there. At the moment, there's a bit of a money go round of that. We may be able to make some efficiencies. Although I'm hoping that we won't, if that doesn't sound counterintuitive, because I want to be doing it as efficiently as I can now, sending out a minimum number of people to make sure it's safe. So actually, I'm not convinced it will change that much, but organisationally, we will be closer with the TOCs, which should improve our state's work. Good. Joe has answered. Joe's in our team. Thank you, Joe. Ordinarily feasibility stage. See, he says it's good. Not all late. Any more questions, either online or here? No, perhaps not. Well, thank you very much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, Roland. When's our next meeting, Louise? We are without chairman today because Gareth is at Rail Live and someone on his way back from Rail Live. as usual with Gareth, he's passed on
17th July.
extensive instructions.
Yeah, 17th July then.
17th of July, so
So, yeah, innovations in OHL, so early, my brain,
no early presentation.
early, yeah,
Good.
we don't know about education.
So here, all
Yeah.
these,
Yeah.
September, July.
17th July, yes.
Good stuff.
Good.
Jeez.
Thanks, folks. Online, I'll see you later.